An experienced electrician was called to repair the electrical system in an isolated mansion after the natural death of its owner. What he discovered in the house's security system revealed evidence that the magnate had not died of natural causes, but was murdered. For years, he was hunted by powerful people willing to do anything to keep the crime secret. This is the real story of how an accidental discovery can pit an ordinary person against millionaire criminal organizations, and how some truths are so dangerous they can cost your life. Leave in the comments, would you keep murder evidence or turn it over to authorities immediately? Chapter 1. Tom Harrison had been working with electrical systems for 19 years, but security system installations had become his specialty over the past decade. At 41 years old, he was one of the region's most trusted technicians for residential security systems, particularly for wealthy clients who required sophisticated surveillance and protection equipment. Living in a modest ranch house with his wife Jennifer, whom he had married 15 years ago, and their 13-year-old daughter Emma, Tom had built a comfortable middle-class life through his expertise with complex electrical and security systems that protected some of the area's most valuable properties. Tom's workshop in his garage was equipped with specialized diagnostic equipment for security systems, network analyzers, digital forensics tools, and testing devices that could troubleshoot the most sophisticated surveillance equipment. His reputation for discretion and technical competence had made him the preferred technician for clients who valued both privacy and reliability. The call that would change Tom's life forever came on a Thursday morning from Patricia Wells, the estate manager for the late Richard Blackwood, a prominent businessman who had died suddenly the previous week at his isolated estate outside the city. "Mr. Harrison," Patricia explained over the phone, "we need someone to assess and repair the security systems at Mr. Blackwood's residence. The systems experienced some kind of failure around the time of his death, and we need to restore them before the estate can be properly secured." Richard Blackwood had been a controversial figure in regional business circles, a real estate developer and investment manager whose aggressive tactics had made him many enemies, but also enormous wealth. His sudden death from an apparent heart attack at age 52 had surprised many who knew him as someone in excellent health with no history of cardiac problems. The Blackwood estate was a sprawling compound located on 200 acres of heavily wooded property, accessible only through a private road that wound through dense forest for nearly 3 miles. The main house was a modern mansion with architectural features designed as much for security as for luxury. Tom arrived at the estate on Friday morning, carrying the specialized equipment necessary to diagnose complex security system failures. The property's isolation and the sophisticated nature of its security installations suggested that this would be a challenging but lucrative repair job. Patricia Wells met Tom at the main entrance and provided him with access codes and system documentation that revealed the true sophistication of Blackwood's security arrangements. The mansion was protected by multiple layers of surveillance: perimeter cameras, motion sensors, thermal imaging systems, and interior monitoring that covered virtually every room in the house. "Mr. Blackwood was very concerned about security," Patricia explained as she escorted Tom through the house. "The systems you'll be working on represent a significant investment in protecting both his privacy and his safety." Tom's initial assessment of the security systems revealed problems that were both more complex and more suspicious than typical equipment failures. The digital recording systems showed evidence of deliberate manipulation rather than random malfunction, with specific cameras and sensors disabled in patterns that seemed designed to create surveillance blind spots. Most puzzling was the timing of the system failures, which had occurred in the hours immediately preceding Blackwood's death. The security logs showed that critical monitoring equipment had been systematically disabled during the exact period when Blackwood was supposedly alone in the house suffering his fatal heart attack. "Ms. Wells," Tom said as he reviewed the system diagnostics, "these failures don't look like equipment malfunctions. Someone with technical knowledge deliberately disabled specific components of the security system." Patricia's response was both evasive and oddly dismissive. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Blackwood often made adjustments to his security systems himself. He was quite technically minded and frequently modified the equipment for his own purposes." But Tom's experience with security systems told him that the modifications he was observing required expertise beyond what a typical homeowner would possess. The pattern of disabled equipment suggested someone with detailed knowledge of surveillance technology and specific training in defeating security measures. As Tom continued his investigation of the security system failures, he began to discover evidence that contradicted the official account of Richard Blackwood's death. The electronic logs showed that motion sensors throughout the house had detected movement by multiple individuals during the time period when Blackwood was supposedly alone and dying of natural causes. Most disturbing were the backup power systems that Tom found hidden throughout the property. These systems were designed to maintain operation of specific security equipment, even if the main electrical systems were disabled, suggesting that Blackwood had been prepared for sophisticated attacks on his property's defenses. During his lunch break, Tom began exploring the security system's backup storage devices, hoping to understand why so much expensive equipment had failed simultaneously. What he discovered in the hidden storage drives would soon make him a target for people who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their secrets. The backup drives contained video recordings that had been automatically saved by security cameras that continued operating even after the main system appeared to have been disabled. These recordings showed the final hours of Richard Blackwood's life in detail that contradicted everything Tom had been told about how the businessman had died. The video evidence revealed that Blackwood had not died alone of natural causes, but had been murdered by at least 3 individuals who had gained access to his home using sophisticated knowledge of his security systems. The recordings showed a coordinated attack that had been carefully planned to appear like death from natural causes. Tom realized that he had accidentally discovered evidence of a carefully orchestrated murder that had been successfully disguised as death from natural causes. The people responsible for Blackwood's death had technical expertise and resources that suggested professional assassination rather than random criminal activity. In recent months, Tom had been studying advanced business development techniques through TED's woodworking, which included comprehensive guides for skilled professionals looking to build independent businesses that served high-value clients. The system emphasized the importance of choosing clients carefully and maintaining the kind of financial independence that allowed skilled workers to avoid potentially dangerous situations. But Tom's current situation was exactly the kind of scenario that the business guides warned against, being trapped in a dangerous situation because of dependence on specific clients or contracts that compromised personal safety. As Tom sat in his truck outside the Blackwood mansion, reviewing the murder evidence he had accidentally discovered, he understood that his life had changed irrevocably. He possessed proof of a sophisticated assassination that powerful people had successfully hidden from law enforcement, and his knowledge of their crime made him a liability that they could not afford to ignore. The question was whether Tom could find a way to handle the evidence safely without putting his family at risk from people who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their secrets. That evening, Tom returned home with copies of the murder evidence hidden in his equipment case, knowing that he was now carrying information that could either bring justice for Richard Blackwood or get his entire family killed by the people who had orchestrated the businessman's assassination. Jennifer immediately sensed that something was wrong when Tom arrived home later than usual and seemed distracted during dinner with their family. "Tom, you look troubled," Jennifer observed as they cleaned up after dinner. Was there something unusual about today's security work? Tom hesitated before answering, knowing that sharing what he had discovered might put Jennifer and Emma in danger, but also understanding that he needed their input to decide how to handle evidence of a murder that had been successfully covered up. Jennifer, I think I accidentally discovered evidence that Richard Blackwood was murdered. The security system recordings show people in his house when he was supposed to be dying alone of a heart attack. Jennifer's face went pale as she absorbed the implications of what her husband was telling her. Tom, if that's true, then the people who killed him won't hesitate to hurt anyone who threatens to expose them. Tom looked at his wife and daughter, thinking about the comfortable life they had built through his security system work, and about the dangerous criminals who would view his knowledge as an unacceptable threat to their freedom. I know, Tom said quietly, but I also can't pretend I didn't see what I saw. Richard Blackwood deserves justice, even if getting it means risking everything we have. The decision about what to do with the murder evidence would prove to be the most dangerous choice of Tom's life, setting in motion a chain of events that would force his family to abandon everything familiar and fight for their survival against professional killers who would stop at nothing to protect their secret. Chapter 2. Tom spent a sleepless night wrestling with the decision about what to do with the murder evidence he had discovered. The video recordings clearly showed Richard Blackwood being killed by intruders who had defeated his security systems, but they also revealed that the assassination had been carried out by professionals with extensive resources and planning capabilities. The next morning, Tom returned to the Blackwood estate with the intention of completing his security system repairs while secretly gathering additional evidence that might help identify the people responsible for the businessman's murder. But his activities were now being monitored by people who had noticed his interest in the system failures. Patricia Wells approached Tom with a conversation that made it clear his investigation of the security systems had attracted unwanted attention. Mr. Harrison, Patricia said with forced casualness, I hope you understand that Mr. Blackwood's estate contains many confidential business documents and personal information that require absolute discretion from service providers. Of course, Tom replied carefully. I only work on the technical aspects of the security systems. I don't have any interest in Mr. Blackwood's personal affairs. I'm glad to hear that. But I should mention that the estate's legal representatives have asked me to remind all service providers that any information encountered during work here is subject to strict confidentiality agreements. Violating those agreements could have serious legal and personal consequences. The warning was polite but unmistakable. Tom's investigation of the security system evidence had been detected, and he was being told to stop asking questions that might reveal information powerful people wanted to keep hidden. But Tom's technical expertise also gave him advantages that his watchers didn't fully understand. His knowledge of security systems allowed him to identify blind spots in the current surveillance and to gather evidence without being detected by people who were monitoring his activities. Over the next 2 days, Tom used his legitimate access to the security systems to copy additional evidence of the murder, including audio recordings that revealed the identities of at least 2 of the people who had killed Richard Blackwood. The conversations he captured made it clear that the assassination had been ordered by business associates who viewed Blackwood as a threat to their financial interests. Most disturbing was Tom's discovery that the murder had been carried out by people with connections to law enforcement and political officials who could protect the assassins from investigation. The audio recordings included references to specific police officers and prosecutors who were being paid to ensure that Blackwood's death would never be investigated as anything other than natural causes. Tom realized that he had stumbled upon evidence of a criminal conspiracy that involved not just murder, but also systematic corruption of the law enforcement agencies that should have been investigating the crime. During this period of secret evidence gathering, Tom found himself thinking about the business principles he had been studying through his advanced training materials. The TED's woodworking guides emphasized the importance of building client relationships based on trust and integrity, but they also warned about the dangers of working with clients whose activities might compromise a professional's safety or legal standing. Tom's current situation was exactly the kind of dangerous client relationship that successful independent contractors learn to avoid. If he had established his own business serving verified, ethical clients, he wouldn't have been vulnerable to criminals who used legitimate service calls to cover up their illegal activities. But Tom's immediate concern was not his future business strategy. It was ensuring that the evidence he had gathered could be safely delivered to law enforcement officials who were not compromised by the criminal organization that had murdered Richard Blackwood. Tom's investigation had revealed that the assassination was connected to a dispute over a major real estate development project that would have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in profits. Blackwood had threatened to expose illegal activities by his business partners, including money laundering and bribery of government officials, leading to his elimination by people who could not afford to have their crimes revealed. The evidence Tom had gathered included not just proof of Blackwood's murder, but documentation of the broader criminal enterprise that had motivated the assassination. The recordings revealed details about ongoing illegal activities that could lead to the prosecution of dozens of individuals involved in systematic corruption. But Tom also discovered that his evidence gathering had been detected by the criminal organization's security personnel. On Thursday afternoon, as he was completing his final repairs to the Blackwood estate's security systems, Tom was approached by two men who clearly were not estate employees. "Mr. Harrison," said the older man with the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to conducting intimidating conversations, "we understand that you've been very thorough in your security system work here. We want to make sure that you understand the importance of maintaining confidentiality about anything you might have encountered." Tom felt his blood run cold as he realized that the people responsible for Blackwood's murder had identified him as a potential threat to their operations. "I'm just fixing the security equipment," Tom replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't have any interest in Mr. Blackwood's personal business." "We're glad to hear that," the younger man interjected, "because people who ask too many questions about Mr. Blackwood's affairs sometimes find themselves facing the same health problems that he experienced." The threat was unmistakable, but Tom also understood that his knowledge of their crime had already made him a target regardless of what he promised about maintaining silence. The criminals could not risk allowing him to remain free with evidence that could send them to prison for murder. That evening, Tom sat down with Jennifer and Emma to explain that their lives were now in danger because of what he had discovered about Richard Blackwood's death. "We need to be very careful about our safety," Tom told his family. "The people who killed Mr. Blackwood know that I have evidence of their crime, and they'll do anything to prevent me from exposing them." Emma, who at 13 was old enough to understand the seriousness of the situation, asked the question that Tom had been dreading. "Dad, what are you going to do with the evidence?" Tom looked at his wife and daughter, thinking about the comfortable life they had built and the dangerous criminals who were now threatening everything they valued. "I don't know yet," Tom said honestly, "but I can't let them get away with murder, even if trying to stop them puts us all at risk." The decision about whether to expose the murder evidence or try to protect his family by remaining silent would test every principle Tom had developed during his career as a security systems expert. But he was beginning to understand that the criminals had no intention of allowing him to make that choice. "What do you think about Tom's situation? Should he have tried to gather more evidence, or should he have gone to the authorities immediately after discovering the murder recordings?" Leave your opinion in the comments about how you would handle finding such dangerous evidence. Chapter 3. Tom's attempts to find a safe way to deliver the murder evidence to law enforcement were complicated by his discovery that the criminal organization had infiltrated local police departments and prosecutors' offices. The audio recordings he had obtained included specific references to officers and officials who were being paid to protect the assassins from investigation. But Tom also realized that simply trying to ignore what he had discovered would not ensure his family's safety. The criminals had already identified him as someone who possessed evidence of their crimes, and they could not afford to leave him alive with the knowledge that could destroy their operations. Over the weekend, Tom began making contact with federal law enforcement agencies that might be outside the influence of the local corruption he had discovered. His technical expertise in security systems had given him insight into how the criminal organization operated, and he understood that his evidence could be crucial to exposing a conspiracy that went far beyond Richard Blackwood's murder. But Tom's investigation was taking place under increasingly dangerous circumstances. His house was being watched by people who made no attempt to hide their surveillance, and Jennifer and Emma were being followed when they left home for work and school. The pressure intensified when Tom received a phone call that made the criminals' intentions unmistakably clear. "Mr. Harrison," said a calm voice that Tom recognized from the estate, "we've been thinking about your situation, and we believe there might be a way to resolve this matter that benefits everyone involved." "What kind of resolution?" Tom asked, though he suspected he already knew what was being offered. "We're prepared to offer you a substantial payment for your discretion about anything you might have encountered during your work at Mr. Blackwood's estate. Enough money to ensure that your family's financial future is secure, in exchange for your commitment to privacy about matters that don't concern you." The offer was for more money than Tom could earn in 5 years of security system work, but he also understood that accepting it would make him a participant in covering up Richard Blackwood's murder. "I need time to consider your offer," Tom said, hoping to buy time while he figured out how to safely deliver his evidence to federal authorities. "Of course, but I should mention that this kind of opportunity has a limited window. We need to know your decision soon, because delaying creates complications for everyone involved." Tom hung up the phone, knowing that he had been given a final chance to cooperate with the criminals before they decided that his elimination was necessary to protect their secret. That night, Tom made copies of all the evidence he had gathered and distributed them to multiple secure locations, including safety deposit boxes and trusted friends who had instructions to deliver the materials to federal authorities if anything happened to him or his family. Tom also made contact with Special Agent Sarah Martinez, a federal investigator who specialized in organized crime and corruption cases. Agent Martinez's initial response to Tom's evidence was both encouraging and terrifying. "Mr. Harrison, what you've discovered here is evidence of a criminal organization that we've been investigating for several years. Your recordings and video evidence provide crucial proof of activities that we've suspected but haven't been able to document." But Agent Martinez also warned Tom that cooperating with federal law enforcement would make him an even higher priority target for people who had already killed to protect their secrets. "These people have murdered federal witnesses before, Mr. Harrison. If you decide to testify against them, we can provide protection for you and your family, but you need to understand that your lives will be permanently changed." Tom thought about Jennifer and Emma, about the comfortable suburban life they had built through his security systems work, and about the dangerous criminals who viewed his knowledge as an unacceptable threat to their freedom. "Agent Martinez, if I don't cooperate with your investigation, these people will kill me anyway to ensure my silence. At least if I testify, there's a chance that they'll be stopped and other people will be protected from what they did to Richard Blackwood." Call to action. The decision to become a federal witness would prove to be the most dangerous choice of Tom's life, But it was also the only choice that offered any hope for justice and safety for his family. During this crisis, Tom often thought about how different his situation might have been if he had built the kind of independent business that systems like Ted's Woodworking could provide to skilled professionals. Instead of being trapped in dangerous client relationships because he needed specific contracts, he could have developed his own client base of verified, ethical customers who valued both quality work and integrity. If you're tired of being vulnerable to clients who might compromise your safety, discover how Ted's Woodworking can help you build a thriving business based on your own terms. Click here to learn how thousands of skilled professionals have achieved true independence. But Tom's immediate priority was ensuring that Richard Blackwood's murderers would face justice, even if the cost of that justice was the destruction of everything his family had built. Agent Martinez explained that federal law enforcement had been aware of suspicious activities involving several of the individuals that Tom's evidence had identified, but they hadn't been able to gather proof of specific crimes. Tom's recordings and security system documentation provided the missing pieces that could finally bring down a criminal organization that had operated with impunity for years. Your evidence shows us not just who killed Richard Blackwood, but how they've been using corruption to protect themselves from investigation. The audio recordings you obtained include admissions of bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy that we can use to prosecute the entire organization. The federal investigation that would result from Tom's cooperation included not just the murder conspiracy, but the broader pattern of corruption that had allowed the criminals to operate without fear of legal consequences. But Agent Martinez also made it clear that Tom's cooperation would require his family to abandon their current life and enter the Federal Witness Protection Program. The people you're testifying against have resources and connections that make them extremely dangerous, Mr. Harrison. Even after we arrest them, their associates will view you as someone who destroyed their organization. Your family's safety will depend on complete separation from your current identity and location. Tom realized that doing the right thing would cost him and his family everything they had worked to build: their home, their community, their friends, and the business reputation that had taken him nearly 2 decades to establish. But Tom also understood that Richard Blackwood's murder was just one crime in a pattern of violence and corruption that would continue until someone had the courage to expose the truth, regardless of the personal cost. The decision to testify against Richard Blackwood's murderers would require Tom to sacrifice his family's current life in order to ensure that dangerous criminals face justice and that other potential victims would be protected from the same fate that had befallen the businessman. Thank you so much for staying with us this far in this incredible story. We truly appreciate your dedication as a viewer, and believe me, the best is yet to come. What follows will show us how Tom's courage to expose these murderers led to one of the most complex organized crime prosecutions in federal law enforcement history. Chapter 4. The federal investigation triggered by Tom's evidence began with a coordinated operation that arrested 12 members of the criminal organization while simultaneously preserving the crime scenes and financial records that proved their involvement in Richard Blackwood's murder and years of related criminal activities. But the arrests also marked the beginning of the most dangerous period of Tom's life, as the remaining members of the criminal organization focused their resources on eliminating the witness whose testimony could send their associates to prison for life. Tom and his family were immediately placed in protective custody, but the threats against them proved to be both sophisticated and persistent. The criminals had resources that allowed them to track the Harrison family even while they were under federal protection, and they demonstrated their willingness to target Jennifer and Emma to pressure Tom into changing his testimony. The psychological pressure was enormous, but Tom also understood that backing down from his cooperation with federal investigators would not ensure his family's safety. The criminals had already decided that his knowledge made him too dangerous to allow to live, and retreating from his testimony would only delay their eventual attempt to eliminate him. "Mr. Harrison," explained U.S. Marshal Rebecca Torres, who was responsible for protecting Tom's family during the investigation and trial preparation, "these people have killed federal witnesses before, and they have the resources to maintain their hunt for years if necessary. Your safety depends entirely on our ability to convict them and eliminate their organization." The evidence Tom had provided was crucial to understanding how the criminal organization had operated for years without detection. His security system recordings revealed not just the details of Blackwood's murder, but the systematic corruption that had protected the criminals from investigation by local law enforcement. Federal prosecutors discovered that the organization had been responsible for at least 6 other murders over a 5-year period, all disguised as accidents or natural deaths. Richard Blackwood's assassination was part of a pattern of eliminating business partners, witnesses, and competitors who threatened the criminals' financial interests. But perhaps most importantly, Tom's evidence had exposed the corruption that allowed the murders to remain uninvestigated. The audio recordings he had obtained included detailed discussions of payments to police officers, prosecutors, and even federal agents who had been protecting the criminal organization from law enforcement scrutiny. The scope of the corruption was staggering, involving over 30 law enforcement officials who had been receiving regular payments to ignore criminal activities and to provide advance warning of any investigations that might threaten the organization. During the months of trial preparation, Tom's family lived in a series of safe houses, constantly moving to stay ahead of assassins who were trying to eliminate the witness whose testimony would destroy their organization. The stress of constant relocation and the knowledge that they were being hunted by professional killers took an enormous psychological toll on all 3 family members. Emma, now 14, struggled with the isolation and uncertainty of protective custody, unable to attend regular school or maintain friendships while living under assumed identities in unfamiliar locations. "Dad, I understand why you're doing this," Emma said during one of their conversations in a federal safe house. "But I miss our real life. I miss my friends and my school and just being normal." Jennifer had been forced to abandon her career and live with the constant fear that their location might be discovered by people who would kill their entire family to prevent Tom's testimony. "I'm proud of what you're doing," Jennifer told Tom during one of their most difficult periods, "but I'm also terrified that we'll never be safe again, even after these people are convicted." Tom himself struggled with the knowledge that his decision to expose the truth had destroyed his family's comfortable life and put them in mortal danger. But he also understood that Richard Blackwood and the other victims of the criminal organization deserved justice, even if the cost of that justice was enormous. The trial itself became one of the most heavily secured federal prosecutions in the region's history, with Tom's testimony requiring protection measures typically reserved for cases involving international terrorism or organized crime bosses. Tom's detailed account of discovering the murder evidence and his analysis of the security system recordings were crucial to helping juries understand how sophisticated the criminal conspiracy had been. His technical expertise allowed prosecutors to explain complex evidence in ways that made the criminals' guilt undeniable. But the trial also revealed the full scope of the organization's activities and resources. The defendants included not just the people who had directly participated in murdering Richard Blackwood, but the network of corrupt officials who had protected them and the business associates who had benefited from their crimes. The convictions that resulted from Tom's testimony included life sentences for the 3 people who had directly carried out Blackwood's assassination, and substantial prison terms for 12 other individuals who had participated in the murder conspiracy or the subsequent cover-up, Perhaps most importantly, the trial led to the prosecution of the corrupt law enforcement officials who had been protecting the criminal organization. Tom's evidence had exposed systematic corruption that allowed the criminals to operate with impunity for years, and the convictions of these officials helped restore integrity to agencies that had been compromised by criminal influence. But the personal cost to Tom's family was enormous. Even after the successful prosecutions, federal marshals warned that the family would need to remain in witness protection indefinitely, as associates of the convicted criminals would continue to view Tom as a threat to their own freedom. Chapter 5. 3 years after the successful prosecution of Richard Blackwood's murderers, Tom and his family were living under new identities in a small town 2,000 miles from their original home. The Federal Witness Protection Program had provided them with new names, new backgrounds, and the resources to start over. But it had also required them to permanently abandon everything that had defined their previous lives. Tom now worked as Robert Anderson, an electrical contractor specializing in residential service calls rather than the sophisticated security systems that had been his expertise. The transition had been difficult, both professionally and emotionally, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about building a successful business based on integrity and community trust rather than prestigious clients and complex contracts. The advanced business skills Tom had been developing through his study of professional development materials proved crucial to his successful transition to a new identity and location. The Ted's Wood. Working guides he had studied included comprehensive business principles that helped him establish himself quickly in his new community, even without being able to reference his previous reputation or client relationships. Tom discovered that skilled craftsmanship and honest business practices could build a successful enterprise anywhere, regardless of past connections or established reputation. Within 18 months of relocating, Robert Anderson had become one of the most trusted electrical contractors in his new community, serving clients who valued reliability and quality over flashy credentials. Jennifer had found work as a school secretary and had become involved in victim advocacy programs that helped other families who had been forced to relocate due to their involvement in criminal investigations. Her experience in witness protection had given her unique insights into the challenges faced by people who had lost everything in order to seek justice. "What we went through was terrifying," Jennifer said during a local television interview about witness protection programs, "but we also learned that doing the right thing, even when it costs everything you have, ultimately leads to a stronger sense of purpose and community." Emma, now 17, had adapted to her new identity better than anyone had expected. She had excelled in her new school and had become interested in criminal justice, often speaking about wanting to help other families who were threatened by criminal organizations. "My father showed me that ordinary people can fight back against criminals who think they're untouchable," Emma wrote in a college application essay. "I want to help other families find the courage to speak up when they witness crimes, even when it's dangerous." The financial settlements from civil lawsuits against the criminal organization had provided Tom's family with some compensation for the life they had been forced to abandon. But Tom often said that the money mattered less than the knowledge that Richard Blackwood's murderers had faced justice. The federal prosecution of the criminal organization had also led to broader reforms in how law enforcement agencies investigated suspicious deaths and monitored potential corruption within their own ranks. Tom's case had demonstrated how criminals could use corruption to hide sophisticated murders, leading to new protocols for ensuring independent investigation of deaths involving wealthy or politically connected individuals. Tom occasionally received updates from federal prosecutors about the ongoing imprisonment of the people he had helped convict. All of the direct participants in Richard Blackwood's murder were serving life sentences, while the corrupt officials who had protected them received substantial prison terms that effectively ended their careers and influence. But perhaps most meaningful to Tom were the letters he received from families of other victims whose deaths had been reinvestigated following the exposure of the criminal organization. Federal investigators had discovered that at least 4 other supposedly natural deaths had actually been murders carried out by the same people who had killed Richard Blackwood. One letter from the daughter of a businessman who had died under suspicious circumstances 2 years before Blackwood's murder particularly moved Tom. "Mr. Harrison, because of your courage in exposing these murderers, we finally know the truth about what happened to my father. For years, we wondered why a healthy man would suddenly die of a heart attack, but the police told us there was nothing suspicious about his death. Now we know that he was murdered by the same people who killed Mr. Blackwood, and his killers are finally facing justice." Tom's expertise in security systems had also led to his consultation on several other federal investigations involving technology-related crimes. His reputation as someone who had risked everything to expose dangerous criminals had made him a trusted resource for law enforcement agencies dealing with cases where technical knowledge was crucial to understanding complex criminal schemes. "Mr. Anderson," a federal prosecutor had told him during one of these consultations, "your case changed how we investigate suspicious deaths and technology-related crimes. You proved that skilled technicians can often detect evidence that traditional investigators might miss." The small electrical contracting business that Tom had built in his new community had grown to employ 3 other electricians, all of whom had been attracted by his reputation for integrity and quality workmanship. The business success had allowed Tom to provide steady employment for other skilled workers while serving clients who valued both technical competence and ethical reliability. In his workshop each evening, Tom often reflected on how his accidental discovery of murder evidence had led to a life that was more meaningful, if more complicated, than anything he had achieved during his years as a security systems specialist serving wealthy clients. The advanced techniques he had mastered through his professional development studies had been crucial not just to building his new business, but to understanding that skilled professionals could create fulfilling careers anywhere by focusing on quality work and honest relationships rather than prestigious contracts or high-profile clients. Tom had also become a speaker for federal law enforcement training programs, sharing his experience to help investigators understand how technology crimes could be hidden and what signs technicians should watch for when working in potentially dangerous situations. The most important lesson, Tom would tell his law enforcement audiences, is that skilled technical workers often have access to evidence that criminals don't realize exists. We need to help these professionals understand both how to recognize potential crimes and how to safely report suspicious activities. And in the quiet evening hours when he worked alone on routine electrical repairs in his new community, Tom found peace in the knowledge that his decision to expose Richard Blackwood's murderers had not only brought justice to dangerous criminals, but had also helped protect other potential victims from the same fate. The electrician who had accidentally discovered murder evidence had become the contractor who proved that people who refuse to ignore criminal activity can build new lives based on the foundation of having done what was right, even when the cost of doing right seemed impossibly high. This story shows us how ordinary people can become targets of powerful criminal organizations simply by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tom proved that even when murderers seem to have unlimited resources and influence, the truth can still prevail if someone has enough courage to fight for it. Sometimes seeking justice requires sacrificing everything we've built. What would you do if you found murder evidence. Tell us in the comments if you would have the courage to face such dangerous people. If this story impressed you, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell for more shocking real stories. And don't miss the next video with another story that will leave you speechless.